Like, that boat is definitely turned on. Like, did the sharks turn it on, or do we? I'm like, is that just a movie mistake? And you weren't supposed to show that the motor is clearly running
Well,
into it,
I
or
thought maybe the splashing we can see is a shark pushing it.
no
Was the best
way?
I could come up with. Because there's sharks that you can see in the first few seconds of this chapter. There are like the silhouettes of sharks just beneath the boat. So I think that there's some splashing. The sharks near the surface of the water. Probably for the purposes of making the film, it was just easier to turn the boat on. But we can assume that the splashing is caused by the sharks pushing the boat into the generator.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking, because then I like that, because if they turned the boat on and hoped that it whapped the generator, that doesn't give them much agency. I like that they slowly take the boat into the generator, then it explodes. And I gotta say, Trent Slater, Trent, Trader, Slant, all the names I've given him, he sees this oil or gasoline pouring into the ocean, and he could lift all those things up.
Yep.
Or move them.
Yeah, you can at least stop the one that's on the dock for spilling out. You can at least pick that one up.
Yeah.
At the very
Trent.
least.
Trent.
Trent is the epitome of he's a beautiful dummy. There's something about him in this movie. He doesn't, I don't know if it's Misty acting with him that makes him better or what it is. But there is something about him, but I agree. He could have done literally anything, and then later when he's talking to Aaron, I believe, and they're like, well, there's oxygen tanks underneath. What are we gonna do? And he's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, we're just gonna have to find out.
That's it. I mean, Trent goes up to the surface to see what's going on. He's up there. He sees these barrels are poured over. There's sparking coming from the generator. We all know what happens when sparks hit fuel. Nothing good. So he decides to just go back down underwater and not. This is when this is the stupid decision somebody makes in this film, regardless of making sharks super intelligent, whatever. The stupidest decision anybody makes here is Trent Slater going back under the surface instead of calling for help at that moment. Because he knows there's only a small crew there. None of them can fix what's going on. He doesn't even make any attempts to fix it when they get down. When he gets down there, he just tells Aaron and then goes about his day.
He also does his clicker thingy, and the sharks don't come, and he's like, oh, that's weird, and he doesn't tell anybody. He just he goes down there and he's like, hey, there's fuel all over the place. Definitely there's going to be an explosion. Also, the sharks are malfunctioning too, so let's just lock ourselves in this underwater prison and call it a day.
I would love it later. I love what you said. So Carl Durant, like, that beautiful dummy. Like, he just says something like that about Trent Slater later on. Like, why didn't you pick up the gasoline?
No, it's like John Hamm in 30 Rock. Where he's just...
He's got a little more... He's definitely, he's supposed to be our Carter Blake, and he definitely doesn't seem as capable. But he's ex-military, I believe, right?
We don't know what he did.
He's doing 100 push-ups before each scene. That is clear.
For his welding scene.
For his welding scenes. Yeah. The wetsuits are out of control in this movie. They are great.
His strutting too is he tried to do some hallway strutting, like Carter Blake in this one as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain his walk. How would you explain his walking, Caitlin? What's Trent Slater's walk?
Well, we have a term in this household that we call ILS, which is imaginary lat syndrome, and that is how he walks, which is he pretends that he has enormous lat muscles in his back, and he cannot move his arms in a certain way, and so he walks with incredible posture, but he needs to turn sideways to go through a door frame. So that is how Trent walks. I don't know. He's more possessed with his walk because, as we recall with Carter Blake is always falling. There's an inch of water on the ground and he's falling everywhere. Whoa. But Trent walks with purpose,
I was concerned when Trent was kind of doing his half jog on the surface. Like, is he going to fall down? What's going to happen here? But he was okay. He was fine.
He was fine. That's how they improved the Carter Blake role. Each character is tweaked a little bit from the first. They make it very clear that Carl Durant is evil in this one. We see it come across pretty hard. Yep. We love Misty, there's no question about it. We don't have to worry about that. And with Trent, they're like, okay, Carter Blake's main downfall was that he could not walk properly and was always falling, so we're going to correct that in this movie. But
I wish in the behind the scenes videos of this, where they're just talking about their roles and like, yeah, this is Carter Blake 2.0. I don't fall once in this movie.
The lawyer guy, he falls over, but me, none at all.
I want that EPK video right there. That'd be beautiful. But that's, you know what? I have a brand new appreciation of both Misty from this clip because she's just so. This is her finest moment. I love her in this. She's the boss in this, and everyone respects her. And Trent Slater runs without falling.
Yep.
So I've like 180'd on both characters. I love them now. Like they're owning this situation. They're crushing it. I do think the Kims don't get much to do in this. They stand in one spot and make comments.
I mean, she does whisper it's possible, so she, confirms that. I want to like those guys so much, but they're not the best, eh? They don't have much going on in the scene, that's for sure.
This really sucks.
Yeah. They're like, oh my God, there's sharks, we're scared. What's a frenzy? They try to have some quips. I just think they're maybe not as good of actors as the others, which is, an interesting one, but.
Yeah, they're fodder for the sharks more than.
Yeah, I don't not like them. I think that kind of I feel like this movie haunts me a little bit, where it's the only one that I sort of constantly revisit and think about why I do and do not like it. I don't know what it is, and I feel like this scene sort of epitomizes it quite a bit. This chapter completely, as you said at the jump, so much is happening in this 9 minutes of this movie, and I wish this would have continued on for the rest of the movie, this pace of happening, but instead, right after this, a million things happen, people are dying, there's a bubbling cauldron of baby sharks, it just slows right down, and then people are just walking in water. So I feel like this chapter of this movie is not representative of Deep Blue Sea at all, but is memorable to why you could maybe like it and enjoy watching it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I was going to say something funny, but that was a good point.
That's great.
What was your funny thing? Say your funny
No.
Say your funny thing, Max.
Say it.
I think it's the framing in this film. So the cinematographer in this movie, Thomas Calloway, he's been working since the 80s. He was on Friday the 13th, The New Blood, Ghoulies Go to College. I mean, this is someone who has worked in low-budget horror, there was a cinematographer on Feast, the 2005 film. So a lot of decent films that has just worked. But I think the framing doesn't help the dialogue because we get a lot of one shots or two shots or just both characters in the cafeteria looking towards the camera. So they're just sort of in frame. And so they're just reciting lines with someone off camera as opposed to being in a big group or doing it over the shoulder. I know they didn't have much time for that. It's a lot more work because, you get the over the shoulder, two lighting things, background, yada, yada. I think some of the framing, and I don't think it's a cinematographer's fault. I just think they didn't have much time, so they needed to capture these shots because they're much quicker. And I think that hurt the dialogue with the actors because there's not a communal feel to them. I mean, when we look back at Deep Blue Sea, there's a bunch of shots with all of them together doing dialogue, walking, talking in the shot, looking at the computer monitors. This one, they're all staggered. I get it. It makes it quicker, but I do think that hurts the flow of the humor and the dialogue a little bit. That's one of the reasons why I think it plays a little off, but I think it was necessary due to budget constraints and time.
Yeah, I really think you can't understate how the budget and time does affect this movie. It's something I talk about in the piece that I wrote where it's people really hate this movie because it's not as good as the original, which original thinking for a sequel, but it's the first movie was given so much money and time and marketing and prominence and all these different things. And this movie just didn't have that. And so, we make fun of, they're in this wet lab. There's 3 locations in this movie. And I think you're right. I think, who was it? The YouTube series Blood, Bath and Beyond. They sort of make fun of the editing of this movie And I think you could make it into a drinking game where the amount of times they say topside is hilarious, as well as like the weird cut sequences, like all of a sudden, you know, Misty's fully clothed looking at the sharks and then bam, she's getting into a wetsuit and about to jump into a pool. So there is a lot of disjointedness, but I agree, like I think they did the best with what they had. And I think the director, Darren Scott himself is a pretty prolific producer, I would say, not a director. You know, he produced, you know, Menace to Society, things like that. And so as a director, he's not as great, but what I get from this movie, and I think why I sort of feel endeared to it in different ways, part of that is I do really like Danielle Savre, if I'm saying her name wrong, sorry, but I get a sense of fun from this movie. Like, I feel like they really enjoyed making it, and I agree, I wish you could feel that a little bit more on screen with them all sort of acting together, because it feels like you're either doing like a one scene, you know, Misty's quipping, or it's like two people together, or that's it. You know, we don't get that in group environment at all, and I feel like it would have been, these characters are maybe slightly more likable than the original, and so
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Just the editing, and you know, I think maybe the editing is kind of it's like that because they just didn't have much time. Like they just don't have time to get them back and forth and extra shots. So I think they had to move at such a fast pace through this film that you just don't have the footage to edit. And because of that, it definitely is affected. But I guess one thing I have is I think I really I appreciate low budget filmmaking because of the way they get really creative with their budget. I mean, you watch certain films, like I love Session 9. I think it's ingenious how they found a location, wrote a script for it to save money, so they didn't have to build sets, very minimal set build. They got good actors, kept it cheap. I guess maybe another fatal flaw with Deep Blue Sea is they're not too creative with their budget. And so you have this styrofoam shark, which I think it was just petrified because of whatever they injected her. And she's just overacting right now. I think Bella's
she's
like,
committed.
Be still, be still, be still. Like that's, so you look really awkward. Like when you think you're being natural, like you actually look really awkward, and that's what Bella's doing. So
she's
it's like,
got two cups in her fins.
You know, when you're really drunk and you're like, oh, I'm gonna act normal, and everyone's like, man, that guy's super drunk. But it's, I just wish they could have been a little more creative with some of their budget, because South Africa is so beautiful, and just the locations they were at. I know you have to shoot on sets. You know, if you go out, that's more expensive on location. But I guess Deep Blue Sea 3 proved on a very minimal budget, you could also make a really nice outdoor film that looks beautiful and with under $5 million. So I know they had a very limited budget and time, but I just wish they would have been a little more creative with in their budget, if that makes sense.
Well, they are creative with the use of the one corridor and the different lighting, which we'll get more into in the chapters. We get it just towards the end of this chapter, but that is a technique they did use here, where it's clearly just had one. I mean, we see we almost see a map of Achilleos in this chapter, where on one of Aaron's many monitors there is kind of a map, and it's a lot more labyrinthine than I was expecting. I'm going to try and map it out, I think, for the events that happen in the future chapters, try and work out where everyone is at any given time, because it's huge. It's all over the place. So I mean, in this wet lab room, you think maybe there's just one or two entrances in, but we find out later there's like 5 or 6, and it's immense. But we don't get that impression without that map. It's just because everyone's in different corridors with different lighting in them. So
and you only really see like 2 doors from the wet lab, so I don't really know how they all got shot into like 7 different corridors. But
and they're all shut. All the doors are. Anyway, we'll cover that later.
Yeah, later.
Chapter.
I think this chapter to me, it also makes me feel like, oh, poor Darren Scott. Like, I feel like he just overcommitted to the idea of this being a sequel. You know what I mean? Like, this scene is like an ode to the arm scene with Dr. Jim Whitlock. But it's like, it's super constrained by all of that. Like, I think it's like a fun homage, and then he does like flip the script, but I think he does that too many times in this movie, where it's like, you think this is going to happen, but I'm going to change it. But it's like, you're still manufacturing the same scene over and over again.
Yeah, because it's like Craig the lawyer he's separated from the rest of the group when the explosion happens, and you think, okay, he's the preacher character of this story. He's off on his own somewhere else. He's going to have his own adventure. He hasn't got a bird. He's got a tie instead. And
oh my god, that same tie. He never changes his tie, and it's so hideous.
It is a different hideous tie from the first scene. He has two equally hideous ties that are both the same colour but different pattern. But he has a matching tie headphone cushion